This is Tom Fox. Welcome to the February edition of The Compliance Life. This month I am featuring another director of trade compliance who now has her own consulting firm, Ellen Smith. I've known Ellen for quite some time. We were both in the Houston compliance community, and Ellen once again has a fascinating journey to and from the director's chair for trade compliance. She has a lot of experience in law firm work and other areas I think you will find fascinating on this journey in the compliance life. In this episode 4, Ellen moves to the consulting world.
The Compliance Life details the journey to and in the role of a Chief Compliance Officer. How does one come to sit in the CCO chair? What are some of the skills a CCO needs to successfully navigate the compliance waters in any company? What are some of the top challenges CCOs have faced, and how did they meet them? These questions and many others will be explored in this new podcast series. The Compliance Life is hosted by Tom Fox, and each month he'll present the story of one CCO through 4 episodes. The Compliance Life is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
We're going to have a quick word from our sponsor, and they'll be right back with Valerie Charles on The Compliance Life. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for our final episode of this month in The Compliance Life, where I've been visiting with Ellen Smith. Ellen, first of all, welcome back.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. This is I love going through this little jot down memory lane.
So, Ellen, in this episode, we're going to talk about your move to Baker Hughes, which is where I think I first met you, and then your move into the consulting world. But you had some great adventures at Baker Hughes. So how did you get over to Baker Hughes?
Well, first I'll say I knew about Tom Fox when I was at Weatherford, because everybody knows about Tom Fox. But I think we did meet during my Baker Hughes days. And I joined Baker Hughes in 2013, and from a mutual friend of ours, I think. I had met a gentleman by the name of Jay Martin. Within, I guess, a couple years of moving to Houston, I was still at Weatherford. Jay and I met and kept in contact, and we'd have lunch every now and then, or breakfast at the Avalon Diner, one of his favorite spots. Jay started, just keeping in contact, and eventually said, hey, what do you think about coming over to Baker Hughes and running a team here? I think the trade team at Baker Hughes was ready for some new vision, and it was a large team. It was, at the time I joined, it was like 41 or 42 people. And this is the old Baker Hughes Oilfield Services Company, a little different than they look today. But Jay asked if I'd be interested, and I started talking to him and decided to make the move. The main reason I decided to make the move was I had never led a team of 40 people before. Throughout my career, my team size have been anywhere from 2 people to at the most, I think, 7 at Weatherford. So it was scary. I didn't know if I could do it, and I felt like, well, I'll give it a shot, and if I'm really bad at it, I think I can probably, go and figure something out. But I just wanted the challenge of leading a team that size and, sort of being in charge.
So you really had a lot of interesting experiences at Baker, but from my perspective, ex-Halliburton employee, wife still works at Halliburton shareholder. One of the most unique times was a period where there was a merger agreement between Baker Hughes and Halliburton. There was some work along that. The merger did not happen. Then there was a acquisition, I think this is the right term, by GE, and then a deacquisition. So it seems to me that you really were working with or towards 3 very different types of corporate entities. What was that like from the trade compliance perspective?
Well, what an amazing opportunity to learn about M&A stuff. I don't think from a trade perspective, I saw everything there is to see in that in that time period I was at Baker Hughes because of all of the M&As, or what Natalia Shahada and I call MAD, M&A and divestiture sort of things that were going on. I think I joined Baker to help the company rationalize the trade team. As I said, there were 40 people on the team, and to rebuild the trade or rebrand the trade compliance program, and really, like we talked about in the last podcast, make it an effective program. And I did that by coming in with a vision of what that needed to look like. So I did that at the start of my career. And what I say is, throughout my Baker Hughes tenure, I rebuilt that program 3 or 4 times because of what you just said, Tom. And it's because we had the failed Halliburton merger. What I like to say is we got engaged to Halliburton with Baker Hughes. We called off the engagement, and Baker Hughes got to keep the ring. So there was a nice payout at the end of that. But then GE Oil and Gas, GE came calling, and GE Baker Hughes did merge with GE Oil and Gas, and that company still exists, the merged company between Baker Hughes and GE Oil and Gas. Baker Hughes is now an energy technology company, but they did divorce from GE, so GE's divested itself of that new company, and now it's on its own. So going through that, rebuilt the program when I started at Baker Hughes during the Halliburton deal. And this was a long time that we were going through the merger talks. We were talking about what the trade program would look like, and helping to set up that program and working with the team at Halliburton to get that done. And a lot of that was looking at what needed to be divested, because the reason the deal did not go through was because of we could not get approval from the antitrust perspective. So we were talking about divesting a lot of businesses, and setting up programs, for those businesses that were going to divest. That didn't happen. GE came. We got to look under sort of the GE trade compliance hood and say, okay, how are we going to merge the Baker Hughes program with the GE program? And we got to take the best of the best from each of those programs and put it together into a new one. And then GE said, we don't want, we're going to separate. So we got to build it again and, separate out what resources we were relying on from GE, and rebuild it again in the Baker Hughes world. So it was such a great time. I was there for a little over 7 years, and really had a tremendous amount of different experiences.
When you moved to Baker Hughes, you moved to a company that had gone through its own FCPA investigation and enforcement action. And my perception from the outside was that Jay Martin had really been a part of a larger team but he led the effort to build truly a culture of compliance. First of all, what was it like to move to a company that had a culture of compliance, as opposed to when you went to Weatherford, where you were building a culture of compliance? And then I'm going to ask you a few words about working with and for Jay Martin. So what was it like around the culture of compliance at Baker for you?
I'm going to whisper this. It was a breath of fresh air to have a culture of compliance. And I was just amazed at really coming into Baker Hughes and the knowledge level of what people understood about compliance, because that didn't exist at Weatherford when I joined Weatherford. And I was sort of on this view that, well, maybe all oil and gas companies are like this. They're all based in Texas. Who knows? But really coming into Baker Hughes and seeing that culture, and that understanding of compliance and wanting to do the right thing and stopping things when it didn't feel like the right thing, that was amazing to me. And it really made my job, I feel like it made my job easier to come in with this vision of what trade compliance should look like and how we build trade compliance into day-to-day operations, because people understood what needed to happen they understood they needed to do the right thing, and they just wanted an easier way to do it. And I was able to sort of put out that vision and get that done. But yeah, that I tell everybody to this day, and right after I joined Baker Hughes at the time, I was saying it too. That culture of compliance that Jay and the team built as a result of the investigation that Baker Hughes went through, the investigations that Baker Hughes went through, um, it's just gold star, and it's what everybody emulates.
I once had the opportunity to interview Jay on a panel, and the other panelists didn't show, so I just got to ask him all the questions I wanted to ask him. And I've done a couple of projects with Jay over the years, but I said to him, Jay, my observation is that you hire very talented people. You make it clear you have very high expectations of them, but you allow them to exercise their own judgment. And at the end of the day, they've essentially got a PhD in compliance. Would that be a fair assessment, or was your experience something different?
My fingers on my nose because it's spot on, Tom. I think that's exactly right. Uh, you know, I Jay gave me a lot of autonomy, but he had this amazing trust in me, and I felt that every time I talked to him. I still feel that way every time I talk to him. I mean, he was such an amazing mentor to me. Um, but understanding, I was joining that class of Jay Martin proteges, I'll say, because I feel like in Houston and really, I think around the country, it's like 6 degrees of separation to Jay Martin. There's some way that everybody knows Jay. Um, and sort of being able to work under his presence, and it is a presence. He taught me a lot about presence and not gifts, but presence, as in showing up and making sure you're available. Um, you're working for Jay is you are on call all the time, and I loved that. I loved knowing that he would, he felt comfortable calling me regardless of what time of day it was. But that's how I wanted. I wanted to be wanted that way, and wanted to be needed that way, and knew that he had that trust in me to say, if there was an issue at 9 o'clock at night, we could work together to get it done.
In 2020, during not maybe the height of the pandemic, but certainly the first year of it, you make the decision to go out on your own. What led to that decision? And could you tell us a little bit about your consulting company and what you're doing now?
The part crazy. But I think Jay left Baker Hughes. One of the main reasons I was at Baker Hughes was because I loved working for Jay and Will Marsh, who was our general counsel at the time. And then Baker Hughes got Regina Jones, who's the current general counsel, and an amazing, amazing woman. Uh, just really bringing the legal team at Baker Hughes into the 21st century, and really doing great things. But at the time, I felt like the trade team, I had rebuilt it a couple different times, and I think I had created my own exit strategy. I think at Baker Hughes, I felt like the team could run on its own, and they didn't really need me. And frankly, I felt like I was doing things that weren't as challenging to me anymore, and started just thinking about, well, what's my next move? And I really felt like my next move would be probably a chief compliance officer if I was going to go to a different company. So I started point, and because I worked very closely with the ethics and compliance side, the ABC side at Baker Hughes. Um, so I started putting out some feelers, and I called some good friends and said, "Hey, I'm going to start looking. Let me know if you hear of anything opening up." And almost all of the folks I called, at least 3 of them, said, "Well, if you go out on your own, we'll hire you." I was like, wow, I didn't think about that. And of course, here we are in the middle of the pandemic. I had had a health issue the year before in 2019. So I sort of had a different mentality about where I was going anyway. And I decided, you know what? Maybe now's the time. I'm working from home. I get to do sort of, I figured out this work from home thing. And I've got a pretty soft landing with 3 clients already going out the door. So I decided to try it, and I had talked to some folks saying, if this works out, would you consider coming on board with me and um, let me give it a go by myself for a couple months and see how it goes? And it went remarkably well. I am so humbly grateful for the referrals that I've received from my network. And, I think I started off the first podcast saying made a lot of great um, relationships at BDP. I think I've been able to sort of cultivate my network through all the different jobs and career moves that I've had, and the firms that I've worked for, and just people I've met. And that's paying off tremendously now. So if there's any sort of words of wisdom I could give to anybody, it's just continue to cultivate that network, because that's really what's gotten me to where I am. So off I went, hung out my own shingle. I'm giving operational advice for trade compliance in the areas of import compliance, export compliance, and sanctions. Got a lot of clients, and a strategic partnership with a freight forwarding firm back from my BDP days. Some people that came back into my life, Andy Piazza and the team that he's building at a company called TWL, Terra Worldwide Logistics. So we just have some really great things going on.
Oh, and I'd like to ask you to put on your prognostication hat and maybe look down the road, because it seems to me that trade compliance has will rather become even more important. And if I could circle it back to some of the areas you started your career in, supply chain is on the minds of almost every business executive today. And you did a lot of work in that much earlier in your career. And I don't know if it's going around to come around, but it just strikes me that trade compliance is going to be even more important, not simply from the operational side, but from the compliance side. ESG has a huge supply chain and trade compliance component, and I wanted to see what your thoughts might be on that going forward.
There goes my landline. Sorry about that. So the it's been so interesting to see how trade compliance has changed throughout my career, and even in the last couple of years. So I started out my career as a customs lawyer, and really there's a whole lot in the export control and sanctions. And I'm going to tell you, I think my dogs are going to bark, so I apologize, but work from home, right? Um, uh, in the export control and sanctions space, that's what I learned when I moved to Houston and got into the oil and gas space. That was always sort of what I considered the sexy part of trade, because you had um, that's where, sort of the big fines and issues came up in the export controls and sanctions world. And then the Trump administration and the China tariffs hit, and all of a sudden, you know, the customs world, all of a sudden in the United States, had a whole lot more to look at, and a lot more visibility, and people were saying, wait a minute, maybe we need some customs expertise now. So I got to get back to sort of my customs roots. Now we have the forced labor issue and the supply chain issues that you just mentioned. So what we've seen, sanctions themselves have evolved over the years. We've seen the traditional, full comprehensive embargoes on countries like Iran, Syria, North Korea, Cuba, and the Crimea region. And then we have these really interesting targeted sanctions that I've had the privilege, or maybe not, to deal with, particularly in the energy space with Russia and Venezuela, and it's really complicated. And now we have the Department of Commerce getting involved with this military rule, end use rule, and a new way of sort of applying sanctions. So the government is taking everything out of its toolkit to deal with economic pressures on other countries. We're not going after the full embargoes anymore. We're doing these really intricate sectoral sanctions and targeted sanctions, and ways of using export controls to deal with sanctions issues. And then, the tariffs now are becoming even a strategic issue for countries. So it's really where I think trade compliance used to be siloed. You used to have your customs lawyers and you used to have your export control and sanctions lawyers. It's not anymore. It all comes together. Back in my Weatherford days, Natalia had the vision to say it's all coming together, and that continues today, and even I think it will always be that way. Every export turns into an import. You're always going to have the issues to deal with, and making sure that you're taking a look at trade compliance from that holistic view of customs, sanctions, and export controls is really, really important. And then back to your comment about supply chain, companies have to know their supply chain. We saw the issues that happened during the pandemic and just the end of last year with all the delays, and you have to understand your providers. You have to make sure that they are partners, not just providers, and that you are all working together. And I think it's not going to get any easier, but I think as long as you understand your business and you have made an effective trade compliance program, you can weather these different issues that come up.
So, Ellen, what are your favorite adopted saying or sayings from the Baker Hughes days and perhaps the consulting days?
I was thinking about this one, and I don't have a favorite saying from Jay, because I think there's just what I have is that feeling of presence that Jay taught me, and it is really understanding that you need to control the environment, and Jay just has that way about him, and that's what I've adopted from him, is sort of that I can't think of the right word, but that presence, and really being a true leader. Jay gave me that opportunity, gave me the autonomy and the trust to do it, and I copy a lot of just his mannerisms and the way he expresses himself from a just sort of a visual perspective and just a feeling, and that's what I've adopted from him. I think I will tell you, I'm going to say it again because I love this saying. I use that life is like underwear, change is good saying throughout my career, because I really do believe in change. And even in my consulting practice, nothing's static. We started out just building trade compliance programs. Now we're building trade compliance programs. We're doing jurisdictional reviews and helping companies with jurisdictional issues. And we're doing managed services now where we can supplement a trade compliance program. So I have 3 employees, a partnership where I can, have additional resources available, and it's just fun to keep doing new things and learn new things and change and grow.
Well, Ellen, this has been a great journey for me to listen to your story. I wanted to thank you again for sitting down to visit with me about your journey to the Trade Director's Chair and thereafter. So thanks again. I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Tom, thank you so much. It was such a privilege to be able to share my story with you and your listeners. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. Thank you again for listening to this episode of The Compliance Life. I hope you'll join me again next week, where I take up another episode in The Compliance Life. The Compliance Life is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network. If you would like to be featured on The Compliance Life, please give me an email at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. Also, if you like this series, please give us a rating on iTunes. Any review and rating would definitely help get the word out about the latest addition to the Compliance Podcast Network. Thanks again.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.